So, a lot of you spend a lot of time in the conservative hive mind that is Elon Musk's Twitter. And that actually might lead you to the question, is satire actually dead? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there have been many viral tweets recently about if Starship Troopers or Helldivers 2, which is inspired by Starship Troopers, are they actually satires of fascism? Which is such an insane thing to say when these things are so over the top. It just like blows my mind how anyone could read them any differently. But we spoke a lot about conservative media analysis and also conservatives not being consistent. For example, my video on Dune 2 and conservatives has been getting a bit more attention recently. So I've got lots of conservatives coming in the comments saying, oh, we like this movie because it's not actually woke, and even though it might have, certain political themes, we just think it's a good movie. But in Dune Part 1, they literally gender swapped and race swapped a character, which they've told me is the worst thing ever, but they don't actually mind it this time for some reason. And it seemed to be the way with Helldivers 2 as well, where all the right-wingers were, promoting about how great Helldivers 2 was, and now apparently they're all saying it's gone woke as well, because some people involved in the game are like left-wing, which should be pretty obvious to anyone, that yes, most good pieces of media are made by people with left-wing politics, hate to break it to you, including most of your favourite franchises, and at the same time, sometimes it takes left-wing people to do these satires of fascism because they're often very close to the conservative mindset, especially in 2024, where, especially in America, most conservatives are actually fascists anyway. So you're basically satirizing them, as we're going to prove with some of the things we're going to look at today, where conservatives are saying, like, how can this be a satire of fascism when I agree with what the fascists are doing in the movie? Very curious, that one. And to start the video, I want to contrast some left-wing or progressive satire versus some right-wing apparent satire. So I want to contrast Grand Theft Auto 4, and the whole game is, satirizing conservative America under Bush, versus some more recent articles by the Babylon Bee. And you guys will tell me in the comments what is both better satire and what is actually more funny as well. So we're going to talk about all of this today and why conservatives are both terrible at satire and don't understand when they are the targets of satire. So before we go any further, please check out my social media, mainly Instagram and my travel Instagram. Also Threads and Blue Sky. I don't use Twitter anymore for the most part. And if you want to support the channel, please check out my Patreon, and one of the benefits is joining the Discord server. So sometimes I can understand how, you can read satire into stuff that maybe isn't satire, or maybe you're not sure if it's satire. So for example, a big one I've had a discussion on this channel about is 300 by Zack Snyder. And I said, this movie's politics are pretty fascist. It's making a film about the blueprint for 1930s fascism, like the Germans were actually inspired by ancient Sparta, and it's making it out to seem like an awesome thing, right? And obviously with the politics of Frank Miller and Zack Snyder, you think that's what they're trying to do. But some people have said, no, this is actually a satire of fascist propaganda because the surviving Spartan, I forgot what his name is, he's telling a story to the rest of Sparta to get them riled up so they go fight the Persians, right? And sure, you can read a movie however you want, but I really didn't get the sense that this movie was out to make a satire of war propaganda of the OG fascist state. To me, it just seemed like a film that was like, oh yeah, the Spartans were actually awesome, and we should remember them as being awesome. And of course, what happened after the movie? Spartans gained more popularity across the world because it was a very successful movie. And yes, most people think today Spartans were both awesome and they're some of the best soldiers humanity has ever seen, which is actually a funny thing to happen because, it's doing the propaganda for them because they weren't especially great soldiers anyway. But then even more recently, I've been going through season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I just watched that episode last night. I forgot what the planet's called, but it's Jack Black and Lizzo are the rulers of this planet which has direct democracy. And you could maybe read into that it's a critique or a satire of maybe what left-wing people want in society. Because although most people don't have jobs anymore, it's the robots who are doing the jobs. Now, in Star Wars, it's pretty clear a lot of robots are actually sentient, and this episode actually makes the point that yes, these robots kind of do have thoughts and feelings. They all congregate in this bar to get like this lubricant as their drink, and they do have feelings. They're scared of being replaced by humans, and then they also have to employ like Mandalorian mercenaries as their defense because they've outlawed having a military, they've outlawed firearms. So then you could maybe read into that they're saying, oh, the left-wing society is so unrealistic that even in a sci-fi universe, this left-wing society is completely defenseless. And they're also hypocritical as well. Like, they ban their own citizens from using weapons, but they hire like private mercenaries to defend them. So yeah, I don't think that was the purpose of the episode necessarily, but I can also understand how you could read that planet into being some sort of satire or critique of a future kind of utopia for left-wing people. But that's two works that are more up for debate, and it's pretty clear if there is satire involved in both of them, it probably wasn't the main intention of everyone involved to be making this big political point. Now let's move on to the, examples I said. Let's have a look at two examples where the political satire is the whole point of these existing. So first I want to talk about Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, obviously, we've had controversy recently where everyone says, oh my god, GTA 6 is going woke because it has a female protagonist. Not that the series has always been a massive critique of, among other things, American conservatism. And in one game that is so true because it's the entire point of the game, that is Grand Theft Auto 4, which is a response to the George Bush administration. Now, I'll play you two things I want to show you because it'll become relevant later. So in the game, even though the whole game is a big response to American conservative domination of the 2000s, two things I want to talk about. There are two things in the media, the TV and the radio, which are satirizing American conservatives in two ways. So the first one is more in the vein of Starship Troopers. In fact, it actually looks like Starship Troopers and Halo, which was inspired in part by Starship Troopers. It's called Republican Space Rangers, an animated children's TV show. Now, let's look at this one first, and I want to talk about it.
Sometimes we kill with undue glee.
Oh, was that your home? Sorry!
Gotta complete the mission.
Impossibly deny extraordinary renditions.
Spreading American values. Sometimes you gotta bomb an orphanage or two. Republican Space Rangers!
This is my home, brothers. Here it is you who is strange. And we all get along?
Make sure you get the children! They'll just turn into insurgents themselves! Innocent people back home will suffer, I repeat! They will suffer!
Hey, this here registers as a strange planet on the insurgent scan. Well, it's on the map, but if I can pronounce the name.
No surprise there, but I say we take no chances anyway. Let's give them 8 kinds of hell, Butch! Fire it all!
With pleasure, sir.
I bet these punks have no capacity whatsoever for peaceful coexistence, drive-through liquor stores, gun shops, or the democratic freedom to have their votes discarded in swamps.
So obviously that is extremely exaggerated, and it's funny on the surface because of its, wildly exaggerated characters, stereotypes of American soldiers. But why it works well as satire is a lot of the things they're saying were of course common in conservative discourse, but why it holds up so well still is because it's still common in conservative discourse. That's what makes it good satire. For example, when they're saying, get the children, they'll just turn into insurgents themselves. And we've heard this a lot, not just from fringe voices, but from establishment and TV figures in Israel itself during what they're doing to the Palestinians, right? And because it fits in so nicely with this insanely exaggerated scenario we're seeing in the cartoon, that's what makes it good satire, because it does fit in so well with this absurd fascist military we're seeing on the cartoons in GTA 4, which is true for Helldivers and Starship Troopers. But now let's get into one which is more subtle. And I say more subtle because although to a lot of people this sounds absolutely insane, it also sounds like something you would have heard in 2008 and also something you would have heard in 2024. And that is the Richard Bastian show Richard Bastian, a conservative talk show host. Listen to what he has to say.
WKTT, because democracy is worth suppressing rights for.
There are no better ways to serve your country apart from one, and it involves taking out museums and inappropriate health facilities. If we're going to stay pure out there and focus on turning this country into an aggressive and limited access paradise, then listeners, you're going to need to start by avoiding romance novels. Kids, the children of America, need to look up to people like Derek the Dodo, and not some liberal puppet on public television teaching you how to count. Okay, there's only 3 numbers I care about, and that is 3, 2, 1, launch. All right, and that is what I like to hear right before we send a missile country's mouth. All right, now if I need my kids to be taught tolerance, sometimes, which is a dirty word in my household, tolerance, but I'll tolerate them fighting. Okay, that is what I'll tolerate. I don't need them to learn about life from puppets. Okay, we've gotten into the PC mode of like, well, we're all the same, we're all equal, man. Hey, women can do anything men can do. Yeah, right? Yeah, sure. BS. Okay, I don't shop uncontrollably. Okay, I can drive a car for more than 30 minutes without hitting something. Okay, that's the difference. Now, today we're talking about family values on the program, and I'll tell you right now, I'm married to 2 women. My wife, my lovely, lovely wife with her beautiful hair and pretty face. The second person I'm married to, America. Now, here's my thing. I won't go down south on either. Why? Because it does not help with populating this great country with real Americans. There are a lot of great traditions left, like hating open-minded liberals and spreading unsubstantiated slurs about them. Okay? Now on Independence Day, I like to find a nice Indian casino and celebrate by trying to steal their shit again. That's what I'm into. Traditional values.
So like I said, that sounds like something you'd hear in 2008 on conservative radio. It's something you'd hear now on YouTube or something, or on, I don't know, Rumble. And obviously, it's funny because he's making fun of conservatives for various things, xenophobia, nationalism, talking about, won't go down on his wife or go down to the southern border. Obviously referencing how conservatives repress view towards things like sex and obviously women's own pleasure and stuff like that. But it's so close to reality. That's why it works so well, because it's clear, it's exaggerated, but not by much. And that's why even now, this is probably recorded in not even 2008, probably recorded in 2007, maybe earlier. It still holds up 16 years later, and the satire is funny. So there are 2 examples for you there of anti-conservative satire, one more like Starship Troopers, one a bit more in line with just, pointing out the absurdity of conservatives. But let's contrast that to conservative satire. So I've got 2 recent articles from the Babylon Bee. I just went on it. Now, the Babylon Bee is like the conservative version of The Onion. Most of its jokes revolve around stupid fan fictions of reality. Like, I don't get what the joke is. And basically, to find this funny, you have to buy into a completely warped view of reality from the conservative side, right? Because the 2 I just showed you, objectively, you can find people on the conservative side who think and act like that. And that's why it's good, because it's pointing out the truth through jokes and through satire. What this is doing is making up stuff to try and do the same thing, but failing pretty miserably. So let's go to the first one. South Carolina women's basketball coach announces incoming recruits Greg and Dave. So prior to the NCAA championship game, South Carolina women's basketball coach Dawn Staley announced a pair of exciting incoming freshman recruits named Greg and Dave. Forget Caitlin, let's see how her scoring record holds up to a 7-foot beast that can drain threes. Welcome Greg and Dave to the Lady Gamecocks. According to sources, Greg Billings helped lead the boys' prep academy of Tampa to the Florida State Finals before announcing this spring he had become a chick. After not receiving any offer from SEC men's teams, I'm happy to announce that I'm totally a woman, said the 7-foot, 230-pound center. I'm glad to finally be living my authentic self as a top women's basketball recruit in the country and to get into that locker room. Recruiting services rank incoming freshman Dave Marshall, number 2 recruit. a stud power forward who set the state record for a number of dunks this past season. Lob City baby, said Marshall. I'm about to dunk all over these little girls. We're about to break some backboards. South Carolina, have some. That is just not funny on any level. And it's basically just there to reaffirm your bigotry. On multiple levels, you would find this funny because you think trans women aren't women, they're men, basically, right? And in this scenario, these men are essentially just pretending to be women so they can still play basketball at a high level because they didn't get picked up in the men's game, basically, right? So it's another thing they keep fear-mongering about is that men will just start doing this, right? And obviously that terrible conservative Daily Wire film called Lady Ballers came out. But like, why is this funny to anyone? I don't get it. Because like I said, with those two things I showed you before, being absurd or being semi-serious, as the Babylon Bee is trying to be here, like a bit more serious, like a news report, you still have to point out something that's true. And when stuff like this isn't happening, again, you only find it funny as something that affirms your bigotry. And that's pretty much it, right? It doesn't say anything about society. It's not funny. It could only be written by a conservative. So here's another one. Lizzo retires to spend more time at Texas Roadhouse wolfing down entire buckets of those delicious rolls. Lizzo retired to spend more time here. The rapper, singer, flutist stunned her fans by announcing her retirement last week so she could devote herself more fully to patrolling her local Texas Roadhouse in search of all available dinner rolls that could be found on the tables of dining families. This is where my heart is. I feel like I've done as much as I can in the world of entertainment, but there are still buckets and buckets of delicious Texas Roadhouse rolls to be scarfed down, along with buckets upon buckets of sweet honey cinnamon butter. This will be the focus of my life now. Local families expressed concern about the future of the Texas Roadhouse dining experiences. As the knowledge that Lizzo may be lurking nearby left most of the customers unsettled, it makes it harder to relax, said one patron. I love enjoying a good steak dinner, but knowing that Lizzo has retired from music and is focusing all her attention on eating rolls is enough to make anyone feel uneasy. I'm worried there won't be any rolls left by the time she's done. At publishing time, Lizzo was reportedly open to expanding her future plans to include finishing the leftover meals of Texas Roadhouse patrons after they were full. So this was in response to Lizzo basically saying like she was leaving, or like it seemed like she was quitting, but I think she clarified saying she was just like taking a step back from social media. Anyway, that's not the relevant part. What's the joke here? The joke is Lizzo is fat and likes food. So she's quit to actually eat more food. That's conservative satire. Fat person likes food. Literally like bottom of the barrel joke. It's so juvenile as well. It feels like it was written by a 10-year-old. Like, oh, fat celebrities retiring. I guess they're just going to do that to eat more food. Again, terrible satire, terrible attempt at comedy, nothing funny about it, and relies on you just hating people for certain qualities to actually find it funny. Like, yeah, if you hate fat people, then you'll find this funny. If you hate Lizzo for whatever reason and you hate fat people, you'll find this funny. And if you don't hate people for being larger, then you're not going to find it funny, obviously. The reason I showed you that and read you those was just to show you a difference in mentality between more left-wing people and between right-wing people when it comes to satire and what they think satire is compared to what satire actually is. They think satire is basically making shit up to just say your own worldviews and get people who share those worldviews to agree with you while saying like literally nothing about society because you have to live in this insane bizarro world of the conservative media to even think this is true, right? So it doesn't work. But now let's go into what I want to talk about today with the topics with Helldivers and with Starship Troopers. So recently, a lot of right-wing people have been saying that Helldivers is like apolitical, doesn't really have much politics in it. This guy, who actually was criticizing me for saying that Cyberpunk was anti-capitalist, was also talking about like being misled by Helldivers because they're putting more rules in their community. Anyway, Helldivers for me is obviously like really obvious satire, as it is to most people. I don't think you have to be like left-wing to see it. It's, you know, a big joke. And also with Helldivers, I don't think it's that deep at all as well. It's so surface level. Like you have a couple people on your ship, you talk to them, they talk a bit about, you know, managed democracy. They talk about like basically the dystopian home that is Super Earth and what's going on with that. And yeah, there is some interesting stuff to the lore, like the Terminids, for example, I think are used for oil when they decompose, and I think it's hinted that they're likely a creation of Super Earth, and they're transported around different planets by the Super Earth military, and then as Helldivers, you're sent to fight them to basically create oil, and it's just basically an excuse for imperialism. And with the automatons, I think they're like socialist robots where some of the military have defected, and they talk in their radio broadcasts about like ending inequality. So they're meant to be basically like communists from the Cold War. You can maybe view the bugs as maybe something to do with the Middle East in terms of oil. And the thing is, I don't think you have to particularly engage with the politics of this game to see it's fun. I mean, it did completely copy the combat from Metal Gear Solid 5, one of like the best playing games of all time in my opinion. So yeah, I played the game, I liked it. I'm not massive on it, to be honest, like haven't played it in a couple months now. But claiming that this game isn't like poking fun at like right-wing things and far-right things is absolutely ridiculous. And you think that the notion that it's going woke is pretty stupid, because we all know these days woke means many things, or, you know, it means everything at the same time, because right-wingers can't define it. So I've seen, obviously, the big one is they say any film with supposed feminist messaging or anti-racist messaging, that's woke, and sometimes it's anti-capitalist messaging, but if they actually like it, like they like Oppenheimer or they like Dune, they'll ignore the obvious, like more left-wing messaging in that film, or, you know, like with Oppenheimer, the humanizing portrayal of communists, and how the film is like criticizing McCarthyism, which all these conservatives are doing again for various different reasons. So yeah, conservatives understanding political themes is one thing, but conservatives going out of their way to basically say that satire isn't satire has become like increasingly common. And this thread was going viral back in February, so I did miss this. But there's one thing I wanted to talk about first. This guy called Isaac Young, we'll get to him quite quickly, but he writes about one of the bugs in Starship Troopers. This is not a face I can relate to, sympathize for, or even have a dialogue with. This screams at me to kill it with fire, even if I didn't want to kill this thing. I want to be in orbit far away from this creature. It's horrific, and only a contrarian can argue against that. And then we go into someone quote tweeting that. The reason Starship Troopers fails on a satirical level is because the emotional disgust the movie mocks turns out to be 100% warranted. If you want to make a movie critiquing fascism, you shouldn't have your collectivism stand in to be brainless monsters who only want destruction. So the brainless monsters who only want destruction is debatable anyway, but this is just so insane to me how they're saying like, oh, your satire of fascism doesn't work because the enemies they're fighting are like quite grotesque to humans. They've done the job for you. They've done the job for you. They've put you in the mindset of a fascist soldier by just lifting it up so you cannot relate to who they're killing at all, because that's how fascists work. How do fascists do terrible things to everyone? Think of the Second World War. How did they do terrible things to everyone? Because they were disgusted by them and didn't see them as equal or human, so that made it a lot easier to do. So what Starship Troopers does in Helldivers is they take that away. You don't have to fight humans. Here's some bugs, and there you can justify every horrible crime under the sun because you personally find them disgusting. Think of all the propaganda about communist and about Jewish people and all the dehumanizing stereotypes used to make fascists go along with that. It's so funny these people are saying it doesn't work because, you know, I would want to kill all those bugs too without a second thought because I find them disgusting. It blows my mind how they don't think the director adapting this book did this on purpose. Like, again, he even said he wanted to make it so obvious. It is so obvious. He doesn't need to make the bugs another faction of humans who you might sympathize with, and because you're just an audience member coming into this world for a brief period, it's basically showing you how fascists see their enemies through the film language. Again, conservatives, man. Let's get into the whole take of that Isaac Young guy. So I just went on his Twitter. He described himself as a fantasy author and a Catholic. So I can imagine his fantasy stuff isn't that good, and he also tweets about how Stone Toss hit the nail on the head with one of his comics about something, if you want to know, you know, about this guy at all. So let's have a little read of this thread. Why the first Starship Troopers movie failed as a parody of Fred. So this went viral, you've probably read it. Watching the movie, it was clear the director was aiming for a campy, over-the-top depiction of the Terran Federation. Perhaps not an outright mockery, but certainly a drastic departure from the novel. First, let's tackle a writing pitfall that irks leftists to this day. If you make your characters naturally handsome, fit, and well-groomed, then it becomes increasingly difficult to properly mock them. Beauty is self-evident, and all the characters in the film are good-looking. This extends to the overall Terran Federation as well. We see clean, beautiful streets. Life seems good for Rico in his high school. This is a far cry from the crime-ridden and drug-addicted cities we know today. Where are the homeless encampments, the ghettos? Can we nail the Terran Federation for being cruel? I guess, but when you play off the cruelty as a joke, you are undermining your own message. This isn't a dialogue about the brutal conditions for training soldiers in the future. This is a gag and it's hilarious. All right, what about the critique of comparison? Perhaps the enemies of the Terran Federation have a better system. Oh wait, no, they're bugs. I've seen people genuinely argue that the bugs are supposed to be sympathetic, but they're still bugs. And then he says that tweet I read you earlier, goes on to say, the only thing you can really critique about the Terran Federation is the propaganda and incompetence. But when everything is so slapstick, it fails at landing a serious point. These guys are badasses in a funny movie, not a warning about the dangers of fascism. After getting loads of pushback, obviously, from people, he said, tens of thousands of leftists aggravated into openly siding for the bugs. The memes were far more effective than the actual arguments over the movie because they exposed what the left's priorities were. It was never about Starship Troopers. It was about their hatred for healthy modes of human existence. So this guy thinks fascism is a healthy mode for human existence. But what I wanted to get into was some of what he said, because obviously it's just so wrong. And he talks about like these people being badasses in the movie. And with the incompetence comment, I don't know what he's talking about there, but their tactics in the movie are so insane. They all just run in like massive crowds, and in their overwhelming numbers, they just like shoot these bugs and stuff. I don't think you come away from the film thinking these soldiers are badasses. You just think they look so ridiculous, which is the point. The guns they carry are absolutely huge. Their tactics are absolutely insane. And it's pretty clear their whole society makes them very ineffective for fighting. He talks about, you know, the streets are clean, the society is very pristine. Where are the homeless encampments? Where are all this stuff? And it reminds me so much of the arguments I often hear for people being pro-Rhodesia or pro-apartheid South Africa. Because if you know anything about Rhodey-boos, people who love Rhodesia, they'll post pictures of some of the streets around like certain cities in Zimbabwe, and they will say, don't forget what they took from us. And essentially they're saying that in their apartheid state and apartheid system, they created a really prosperous society. And because they lost to like the socialist guerrillas and other factions who dismantled the state of Rhodesia, it just took the country completely backwards, because it was only the white fascist system that could create a state like this. And it reminds me of his argument of like, you know, this fascist system created this for a certain group of people, therefore it was good. Just like with apartheid South Africa and apartheid Rhodesia, like, yeah, living in a fascist settler colony where you keep the majority of the population in poverty and brutal work conditions to your benefit will often create a lot of material wealth for the people who run that system. Seems to be the case in things like Starship Troopers, where you have to basically be a soldier to have full citizenship, basically through their wars against groups like the bugs, like in, you know, Helldivers as well. This is how they enrich themselves in this fascist colonial system, essentially. Also, him talking about these soldiers being fit and good looking, while him wanting to kill the bugs himself, again, just shows you you're the target. If you're siding with the fascists based on the fact they have clean city streets and they're good looking and muscular against the bugs just because they look ugly and in your mind like inferior, then yes, you're the target. It's making fun of you, and that's why you don't get it. That's why it's so funny. This guy isn't saying it's a bad satire of fascism. He's saying it's not actually a satire of fascism because I'm a fascist and I want to live in this world and I want to be on the side of the Federation there, and I want to live with them because they have clean streets. It's better than this. And if I was in their military, I'd go kill those bugs too. Hell yeah. Literally, it's not far away from wanting to be a Republican space ranger. That's just like a more heightened version of it. And it makes you ask the question, like I said, is satire actually dead? And no, thankfully, satire isn't dead in most places, but it is dead for conservatives. They can't realise when something is straight up satirising them, and their version of satire is just insane. Like, it's the Babylon Bee. That's what their version of satire is, where you say, oh, trans women are actually men, and fat people like food too much. I wonder why the Babylon Bee isn't more popular. But yeah, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.